Economic slowdown fears continue to mount. To economist Lindsey Piegza on whether there is any way to stem a worldwide virus recession. Lindsey, I would assume that it's almost impossible for Europe to avoid a recession right now. They were already having economic troubles, no?
I would 100% agree with you. I think Europe was already on extremely fragile footing going into 2020. We saw a very minimal growth profile, consumers under pressure, business investment under pressure. And so they were already experiencing very weak economic growth. Then you layer on this external shock of the coronavirus, and it's going to be very difficult for the Eurozone to remain in positive territory. So a recession could be a viable possibility in the near term.
And will it happen here, Lindsey?
Well, I do think that if the virus continues to spread and we do see this reaction of the consumer pulling back, businesses unable to fulfill demands and production is shut in, there is a possibility of seeing that negative decline in activity for that extended 6-month period. That's not our base case. Right now, we are expecting just 1 quarter of negative growth in the second quarter. We do think the hardest hit is going to come April and beyond. But again, if we are able to contain this virus, we could see more of a U-shaped recovery back into positive territory by the second half of the year. But again, it's all about the depth and duration of the impact.
It is. And you talked about demand. The president has talked about that. He's talked about pent-up demand. That is, you look at 6th Avenue here in New York, and it's just kind of a bellwether for what's happening around the country where the streets, I mean, you see a little bit of traffic, but for midday in Manhattan on a Friday, this is usually a packed street, and it's not at all that way now. Is there such a pent-up demand, which will continue, as you say, into April, that once we have some relief from the virus, we could come roaring back and maybe even be back to where we were before the market started to fall?
Well, I do expect a recovery, and I do expect a bounce in demand. I don't know if we would necessarily come roaring back, because there still is going to be some trepidation, even after the numbers start to decline. In terms of the coronavirus cases, we reach that peak level and start to dwindle off. There still is going to be a hesitancy among consumers to go out into the marketplace, go to movie theaters, go to sports arenas. So I think it's going to be more of a slower-based upward trend as opposed to a sharp V-shaped recovery.
But in terms of buying things, do you think that pent-up demand will be fulfilled? Will it be able to be fulfilled by the suppliers?
Well, that depends. It depends on how fast we get production back online. Now, we've already heard about some workers returning to factories overseas in China, which should alleviate some of the pressure in terms of domestic manufacturers relying on parts coming from overseas. But again, it depends on whether or not American businesses have the workers in those positions to actually create those goods to meet the pent-up demand. So there's a little bit of some nuances here, some moving parts that we have to get all our ducks in a row in order to meet that more positive scenario.
Lindsey Piegza, great to see you again, Lindsey. Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Well, the FDA just granting emergency